Liver Institute. We are the largest liver patient organization and are so happy to have you joining us today. At GLI, we bring together more than 200 organizations across our councils, our campaigns, and our events to advance liver health as public health policy. Our mission is to prevent liver disease, improve early detection, and scale the most effective strategies for supporting individuals and families impacted by liver disease and liver cancers. Today, we are focusing on a critical aspect of liver health: nutrition, something that we are asked about all the time, and we wanted to bring this information to you. Nutrition plays a fundamental role in liver disease prevention and management, yet many struggle to find clear and practical guidance on how to implement dietary changes that support our liver function. From understanding essential dietary principles to balancing cultural traditions, grocery costs, and lifestyle factors, there are so many questions about how to make sustainable, liver-friendly choices. To help answer these questions today, we are joined by truly an esteemed panel. First, we will hear from Dr. Jennifer Lai, a general and transplant hepatologist at the University of California, San Francisco, who will provide insight into the role of nutrition in liver disease and discuss nutritional choices that can promote liver health. Following her presentation, Dr. Lai will be joined by liver patient advocate and author Karen Hoyt, as well as certified health coach and liver patient advocate Susan Harava to help answer key questions from our large liver patient community. We are so glad that you submitted your questions today. Dr. Lai, Karen, and Susan, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. Dr. Lai, I'll now hand the conversation to you first. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Sarah. It is great to be here, and I'm so honored to be here to support the community and also just to engage with you. So, part of the fun of this presentation and part of the learning for me and for you is actually through engagement. I know that many of you submitted questions already, but I would really love for you, as the talk goes on, for you to actually send me some more questions through the chat function so that we can so that I can try to address your questions after the talk. I've actually really shortened my usual talk from about an hour to 20 minutes just so that we can spend 30 minutes afterwards just addressing your questions. So please submit questions as you go along. Okay, so hopefully you can see my slides. Let me know if you can't. And again, I'm so honored to be here to speak about nutrition and liver health. As Sarah mentioned, I am a hepatologist, so I specialize in managing patients with chronic liver diseases, and I practice at the University of California, San Francisco. Here are my disclosures. So we are all here obviously at the Global Liver Institute webinar because of this beautiful organ, which is, I was just starstruck by this organ, actually, my first day of medical school, and I've never looked back, never regretted that. But I know that that many of us are actually here because of underlying chronic liver diseases that can threaten the liver, like viral hepatitis, autoimmune hepatitis, alcohol-related liver disease, iron overload, and the cholestatic liver diseases like PBC or PSC. And there are also so many effective therapeutics and therapeutic strategies available to protect your liver that hepatologists are very well equipped to prescribe or to recommend to manage these individual liver diseases. But even with these therapeutics or therapeutic strategies, even once we gain total control of these external forces like iron or PBC or hepatitis C, the liver is still vulnerable to one major factor, and that is excess fat. Now, you might be surprised to know that there is actually a very effective therapeutic for excess fat of the liver, and that is nutrition. And there is so much scientific evidence out there to support the critical role that nutrition plays in contributing to the deposition of fat in the liver. But I found in my early years of practicing as a hepatologist, and as we learned more and more about excess fat and the role that it plays in damaging the liver, even with all of these other therapeutic strategies against known chronic liver diseases like hepatitis B and C and PBC and PSC, I found that neither hepatologists nor our patients were really well informed or empowered with information on how to use nutrition as a therapeutic strategy to manage chronic liver diseases as well as to protect the liver from excess fat. So that's why I'm here today. Now, before we get into the potential nutritional strategies that I want to talk to you about, I do feel compelled to take you through a little bit of mini medical school, just a couple minutes worth, to provide you on a basic primer of liver lipidology. In other words, the science of fat in the liver. Now, here's a very simple model of the three main mechanisms of fat regulation in the liver. The first is input. The whole cycle of excess liver fat starts with excess calories, not just fat, but actually excess total number of calories, along with the state of obesity, nowadays called excess adiposity, which ends up putting a lot of circulating fatty acids into your bloodstream, both the excess calories and the state of obesity. Now, intake of excess calories, particularly in the form of excess sugar, will then lead into the second mechanism of fat deposition, which actually just generally increases liver fat storage. It's a process called de novo lipogenesis. So that, in other words, it means new, which is de novo, fat production. So the genesis of fat. And this process is especially stimulated by sugar, and in particularly, it's stimulated by fructose, which is really found in high concentrations in ultra-processed foods, which you're going to hear about in a little bit. The third mechanism of fat regulation in the liver is export. The more fatty acids there are, the more the liver has to package these fatty acids into little cholesterol bundles that you might recognize in the form of your blood work. You'll see it in the form of LDL and triglycerides. And we all know that things like LDL and triglycerides, when they're very high, do contribute to fatty liver disease, they contribute to heart disease, they contribute to your risk of stroke. Now, in terms of this exporting pathway, this is very highly regulated. In truth, there's not that much that nutrition can play to directly change the rate at which your liver exports fat into these packages, unless you're eating a lot of excess saturated fat. But hopefully, you can see how nutrition can play a key role in two of the three mechanisms by which fat occurs in the liver, that is through input and increased fat storage. So perhaps the best way to summarize how we can leverage nutrition to optimize our liver health is simply to avoid excess calories, simply to avoid excess sugar, and of course, exercise, because that's going to actually use up more calories and also help utilize some of the sugar faster so it doesn't hit the liver at such a high rate. Now, all we have to do is follow those simple instructions and the fat will go away from your liver. I'm sure many of you have heard, if you've been told that you have fat in your liver or trying to optimize your liver health, that these are the three simple things you need to do. Now, of course, if it were really that easy, we'd all be doing it. And, the whole idea of metabolic dysfunction associated steatotic liver disease or MASLD would actually not exist anymore. But man, is that really, really frustrating, because I personally haven't found for my own self that I can do those simple things, avoiding excess calories, avoiding sugar and exercise, that easy. And I know in caring for patients with chronic liver diseases that they also don't find that very easy. And the reality is it's not your fault. There are so many external factors that contribute to making it very difficult to follow these instructions. Your metabolism, your hormones, genetics, emotional factors, cultural influences. And then there are external factors that are just growing and growing. The whole food industry and marketing has been designed to make sure that you eat excess calories and you eat excess sugar. Our built environment can make it very hard to access some of the foods that are really great for your liver, as well as unaffordability can also prevent us from accessing kind of liver health. And so, my goal today is actually to provide you with strategies on how we can try to follow a liver friendly diet to help protect your liver as well as manage chronic liver diseases. And so, it really is about the strategies that we can do to facilitate um, good eating. And these strategies come in the form of 80, 30, and 10. Just want you to remember these three numbers, and we'll go through this in the next 20 minutes. Now, before we get into the strategies, I just want to take a little detour into the idea that nutritional strategies may differ by the stage of liver disease. They do differ by the stage of liver disease, and depending upon your personal stage of liver disease, your hepatologist, your gastroenterologist, your practitioner caring for your liver may be guiding you more in one direction than another. And so I just want to give you a general overview as to why some of the recommendations may sound different than what I'm providing. The stages of liver injury go from sort of a healthy liver, but you have chronic underlying liver disease, which leads to inflammation, which leads to fibrosis or scarring, which then, when scarring accumulates, it leads to cirrhosis ultimately. Now, the liver function actually will stay preserved through this entire stage of chronic liver disease to scarring until the ultimate last stage of scarring, which is stage 4 scarring, when the liver gets completely impaired and actually stops. It has a difficult time processing toxins, making proteins, and the nutritional strategies will differ based on this stage. So, the nutritional strategy up until the time the liver has cirrhosis is really to protect the liver and to to try to avoid excess calories and to try to reduce the de novo lipogenesis, the fat in the liver. And then when the liver has cirrhosis and the liver goes into failure, the nutritional strategy is a little bit different. It really is about supporting the body's needs. And so some of these strategies may need to be prioritized differently depending upon if you have cirrhosis or not. Today, my talk is really going to be focused on the non-cirrhotic. So when your liver function is largely impaired, although truth be told, these are strategies for healthier living, and I do recommend actually following them in general, although talk to your hepatologist if you do have cirrhosis and need to prioritize your strategies. Okay, so let's get into the three strategies. So 80, 30, 10. So what on earth are these numbers? So the first number is 80, which stands for 80% plants, which is what I want you to aim for in your dietary pattern. Plants are rich in vitamins and minerals. They're rich in antioxidants. They're rich in polyphenols. They promote a healthy gut microbiome. One of the key strategies to eating more plants is that you actually end up eating less meat. And so, really, when we talk about 80% plants, we're also talking about a diet that really has less meat than the average Western diet. Now, it's easier said than done. I recognize that. But I want to provide you with some strategies on how to nudge toward a plant forward diet. The first is you need to take inventory on where you are right now. Let's say that your week in general your day consists of 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. That's 21 meals. I want you to do a mental calculation of how many meals a week you are eating meat. Are you a person who eats meat pretty much every meal? So you have bacon and sausage or ham with your breakfast, and then cold cuts in your lunch, and then you start your dinner planning with like the piece of bland meat that you're going to eat? You might be in the 21 category. And you might be someone who says, "Oh, I eat meat rarely, only when I order out at a restaurant," or maybe you only eat dinner, you only eat meat at dinner, but during lunch you're able, you know, you don't really typically include it, and during breakfast you don't include it. So you may be a 7 day a week, 7 meal a week kind of person, or you may be a 21 meal a week kind of person. Just find out where you are. Wherever you are, let's figure out the best strategy. It may be that you start with meatless Mondays. If you're one of those people that eats every meal, every single day a week, maybe the most um, friendly and approachable and feasible strategy is just, I'm going to try not to eat meat on this Monday, on Mondays. Okay. It may even be, I'm just going to try not to eat meat 3 breakfasts a week. Okay. You may be someone who says, I don't eat meat that often. But then, you know, keep working at it. Keep working at nudging yourself. And if you don't eat meat that often, well, can you just try to go down to only 1 day a week in which you do eat meat? So now you're a meat Monday. You're going to be at 80% at that place. If you're struggling with trying to eliminate meat from your diet because it's so incorporated into your diet, think about alternative meats. Now, this will there's a lot of controversy about alternative meats. I'm happy to discuss it more if that's interesting to you. You can put that in the chat if you have specific questions. But what I think of alternative meat, you know, some of those things like Impossible burgers or Beyond sausages, I sort of think of them a little bit like a nicotine patch if you're trying to stop smoking. The nicotine patch is better than the tobacco contained in the cigarette, right? I'd rather you be using a nicotine patch than smoking cigarettes. Definitely better for your overall health, but I don't want you to stop at the nicotine patch and use the nicotine patch forever. The nicotine patch is just a mechanism to try to wean yourself off of the nicotine and the cigarettes altogether. That's how I approach alternative meat as well. It really gets you starting to think of like where you put meat, how often you're eating meat. Do you really need meat in that? Can you think of other ways? It really just gets you into the habit of thinking about other sources of your protein. And then know your other protein sources: legumes, pulses, tofu, tempeh, quinoa, almonds, and other nuts, vegetables. Whole wheat pasta has a ton of protein. So these are strategies that you can use to nudge toward a plant-forward diet. So that's an 80% strategy for that's one way to get 80% plants. Eat less meat. You got to replace the meat with something else. The other strategy, the other strategy hidden behind the 80 is that if you're eating plants, hopefully you're eating less ultra processed foods. I think we're all familiar with what a processed food is, but I want to give you sort of a tip to identify what an ultra processed food is, because technically olive oil is processed, right? Tofu is also processed, but those aren't the kinds of foods that I'm talking about. I think you know that. You know, bread is processed, milk is you know, milk that you buy from the store is technically processed. What I'm talking about are ultra processed foods. Two ways to identify. First, it's wrapped in plastic. You might be looking at this and thinking, hey, wait, that doesn't look like what I know of an ultra processed food. And you're absolutely right, because there is a second rule, and that is that it contains at least one ingredient that would not be found in a domestic kitchen. I think we would all recognize this: Oreo as an ultra processed food. And it's because if you just turn it over on the back and you read the label, you will definitely find things that are hard to pronounce, and you definitely do not have them in your own domestic kitchen. Now, what are some strategies to help reduce the consumption of ultra processed foods? So first is eat from a bowl and not from a bag. So, you know, we all have plenty of ultra processed foods in our pantry. I myself also have it. But sometimes the habit is just to open the bag and start eating from it. And then before you know it, you've eaten half or 3/4 of the bag. And so what I recommend that you do is that you actually at least pour it into a bowl. You know, go ahead and roll up the bag, put the clip on it, put it away, and then eat. And that way you really have, some form of portion control before you go digging into the bag into those disappearing calories. The second is when you go to the supermarket, shop the perimeter first. Don't go into the center. The way that supermarkets are built and the way that the food supply works is that all the stuff that is perishable, which are the things that I prefer you to eat, those things need to be brought into the supermarket much more frequently, and therefore they're always around the edge of the market. So go shop the perimeter, go straight for the fruit and veggie section in my markets on the left side of the market. Shop around the full perimeter before you enter in the center. And that way you will have, already satiated your eyes, your appetite with the fresher stuff. As well as have more of your cart filled, and hopefully less energy, less appetite for some of the ultra processed foods that are most frequently in the center aisles. Another strategy is to think as you go shopping at the supermarket, as you reach for the foods that you buy, would my great grandmother recognize this food? And if that's the case, it is almost certainly an ultra processed food. And then honestly, these days, a lot of the food, you can just ask that of yourself. Can I recognize where this food came from? Can I recognize the original, what soil it came from? Can I recognize the vegetable, the fruit, the grain, the spices that were in this? And for this item, I have no idea what those would be. Lastly, I want to emphasize that eating 80% plants is actually a strategy that's also going to get you to eat more fiber, which is absolutely key for anyone's diet. There are so many benefits of fiber. It fosters a healthy gut microbiome. It helps to regulate blood sugar. It helps you to feel fuller, so maybe less room for ultra processed foods. And it also has been associated with a lower risk of many cancers, but particularly of colon cancer. As we think about eating more fiber, it's really important to figure out, well, how much fiber should you really aim for? Well, here are the recommendations from the National Academy of Medicine. There are different rules. Some people, if you start Googling this, you'll see that for every 1,000 calories, you should eat 14 grams a day. So, the average adult who needs 2,000 calories should eat about 28 grams per day. Here's another general rule of thumb. A woman less than 50 years of age should eat about 25 grams, and a man 38 grams, and then over 50, a little bit less. In clinic, when I'm talking to my patients, I make it a lot easier, and I just say, aim for about 25 or 30 grams a day. I say that to everybody because I know that the average American who's not thinking about this, who's just eating the American diet, is consuming less than 15 grams, oftentimes closer to 10 grams a day. So I know if I say just get to 20, 25, 30 for the person who's really conscientious about this, I know that they're getting as close. They're getting much more than they typically would if they weren't thinking about it. The other important thing to really make this fiber rule happen in your life is not only to know how much fiber you should be taking in, 25 or 30 grams a day, but you also need to be empowered with the information of how many grams of fiber are in your typical foods. So I want you to just think about, the last thing you ate, maybe whatever you ate for lunch or whatever you happen to be snacking on. And just Google how many grams of fiber are in a serving of X, how many grams of fiber are in an apple, how many grams of fiber are in a banana. You have to start with that because I think you might be surprised to know how relatively little fiber is in there. A lot of my patients say, oh yeah, I get plenty of fiber. I eat an apple or I ate a salad. But an apple typically has about 2 to 3 grams of fiber. What's the fruit that everybody talks about, that helps you poop? It's a banana. Also only 2 grams of fiber, not even close to 25 grams of fiber. And so you really have to be empowered with a lot of this information. I'm not saying that you need to log your calories every day, but I do think that when you're fiddling on your phone at lunchtime, you're sitting alone, or at breakfast time, just every so often Google the thing that you're eating and just see, oh, okay, well, typical, my typical salad has so much. Oh, look at this pasta that I'm eating. How much does a cup of pasta have? How many grams of fiber? And over time, I mean, in reality, the average American eats maybe about 25 foods, 25 to maximum 40 foods. If you do this over a 2 week period of time, you're going to actually know the fiber content of pretty much about 80% of the foods that you typically eat. So that's going to help you. The other thing is that when you do reach for the ultra processed foods, which have a label on it, this is one of the hacks to try to choose the healthier options among the ultra processed foods is the one with more fiber. Now, you can't just look at the fiber content on the label. You can see the fiber content here has 7 grams, but actually, you can get 25 grams if you ate 3 or 4 of these bars, right? But that's not what we want you to do. I don't want you to eat 4 bars just to get your 28 grams of fiber. I recommend that you use the fiber intake, the 5-to-1 rule. A ultra processed food that is a good source of fiber has a total carbohydrate to fiber ratio of less than 5. Okay, so you look at this label, take the total carbs here and divide it by the fiber. And if it's less than 5, that is a relatively good source of fiber relative to the amount of added sugars that is contained in that ultra processed food. Okay, now you may be wondering, well, hey, this is pretty good. It's only, somewhere between 2 to 3. So it follows Dr. Lai's less than 5 rule. So you might be wondering, well, tell me what this is. This is a Kind bar. I love this. This is my go-to snack. It's dark chocolate nuts and sea salt. It's very delicious, and it follows the 5-to-1 rule. Okay, so that is the number 80. Let's go to number 30. 30 stands for the number of plants per week that I want you to eat. This really adheres to this principle of plant-based dietary diversity. It's really, if we're going to support your microbiome, if we're going to support your liver health, we want you to be exposed to as many polyphenols and antioxidants as possible. And that is really best achieved by eating a diversity of foods. Now, when I talk to patients about a diversity of foods, they are really thinking it's very easy for them to think about the vegetables and fruits. Okay, but I want you to think more even beyond the fruits and vegetables. And there's a whole cornucopia of other foods that you can eat that count towards your 30. Okay, so there are legumes and pulses, there are nuts and there are seeds, there are whole grains, and then, of course, there are the incredible spices. There are hundreds of spices out there, each of which have unique therapeutic and healing properties. And those properties actually become synergistic when you add them. So don't just add only, turmeric. Add turmeric with black pepper. Those are the combinations that we're really familiar with. But go through make sure that you have lots of spices and literally just start tossing and experimenting with throwing them into everything that you eat. If you eat avocado toast, add some turmeric and sumac and black pepper on that. Don't just sprinkle the salt on it. So these are some of the strategies that you can these are some of the foods I want you to expand to. And also, don't forget that 2 of your most favorite foods are actually count towards your plant diversity, and that is dark chocolate as well as black coffee. So go ahead and count those in as well. I'm going to end with the last of the 3 strategies, and that is the number 10, which stands for the minutes of physical activity that you should do ideally after eating. If we're going to maximize the physical activity and sort of optimize the benefits of activity, I want you to do it as close to after eating as possible. Okay, the studies have shown that really any time after is great. Any physical activity obviously is great. If you can do more than 10 and up to 30 minutes, even better, obviously. And if you can do it within like a 30-minute window after eating, that's great. So if you have a 1 hour lunch break, for example, and you eat within the first 30 minutes, spend the next 30 minutes walking around to maximize and sort of help get some of that sugar that you ate from your lunch out of your bloodstream. Okay, or if you're working from home, for example, or you generally you stay at home, maybe after breakfast, maybe that's the time when you should take out the trash and you should do the laundry, and you should do the vacuuming right after you eat. So you can incorporate some movement to help again process the sugar. Um, you can a lot of now it's getting to spring, so the weather's better in many places, but some places it's too hot to go outside. You can figure out a circuit in your own house. You can do my favorite activity actually is the chair stand. I find that actually pretty difficult on the quads and actually really good cardio vascular exercise. So you can do chair stands. You can walk around the stairs. You can walk in the hallway. You can walk to get your mail, and you can do a circuit and maybe just say, "I'm going to do that 3 times after I eat dinner." But come up with a way to challenge yourself in order to sort of encourage yourself to do some activity. And the last recommendation I have is to do the soleus push-up. I'm going to leave this as a cliffhanger, but you can always consult Dr. Google for this, who will be a reliable source of information on what the soleus push-up is. But the soleus push-up has actually been shown in a clinical study of healthy individuals to reduce the glucose in your bloodstream if done after meals. So these are the 3 strategies to healthier eating: 80 for 80% plants, 30 for 30 plants per week, and 10 for the number of minutes of physical activity that you do after meals. Now, this, I want to remind you, is really the ultimate goal. If you're here, you are really optimizing your liver health. But figure out where you are and remember that healthier eating it's not healthy eating, it's not black or white. You're not either healthy or unhealthy. Wherever you are, we can always get better. I'm still working, I do this for a living, but I'm still working on nudging myself to getting closer to 80 30 10. I'm aiming for consistency here. So if where you are is 10 15 0, and in the next 3 months you get to 15 25, that's even better. I want you to be consistent and consistently moving towards direction of healthier eating. So here's to healthier liver. Thank you so much, and I look forward to your questions.
Dr. Lai, thank you. I see a few questions, and I wanted to make sure you could see that. If not, I would be happy to read them. The first question, thank you, Maria, is excess fruit considered excess sugar?
Oh, this is such a great question, Maria. Thank you so much for bringing this up. So, there is sugar contained in fruit for sure, but I do not want you to think about the sugar in fruit as added sugar. When we talk about avoiding sugar, we really should be thinking about avoiding added sugar. So basically, the sugar that is not naturally found in that food. So a mango, which is well known to be high sugar, have a high sugar content. The reason it should not be considered as added sugar is one that sugar is native to the mango, but the sugar is also wrapped up in the food matrix with all of this fiber. So in fact, when you eat the whole mango, you're also getting all that grainy stuff in the mango, all the fiber. And so as it goes into your intestines, it actually it doesn't absorb as quickly into the bloodstream because your body actually needs to like peel those sugars off of the fiber and digest the fiber before the sugar can get into the bloodstream. So in fact, a fruit is a great choice. So don't worry about the fruit and sugar. Now, if you're one of those people that eats no ultra processed foods at all you're doing is eating fruit and vegetables and nuts, then maybe we can optimize and we can say, okay, well, some fruits have higher sugar content than others. Maybe eat more berries, maybe eat more oranges because those are the lower sugar content foods. But I rarely find an individual who's so optimized that they're eating no ultra processed foods. I would say work on even 1 or 2 days a week replacing those chips with an apple or an orange, and you're doing super great. Oh, Sarah, you're still on mute.
Thank you. Great answer. Thank you for that. A reminder to our viewers, we are live right now, so please continue to send in your questions. The next question from Gina, thank you, is along the lines of sugar and sweeteners. Do you have a suggestion on if there's a better sugar alternative for occasional sweetening? So for
Mm,
example, whether that's in some beverages or if we were to sweeten chia pudding. What
yeah.
are your thoughts on that?
Awesome question. I think that there are a lot of people who say, "Oh, I don't use sugar. I use honey. I use agave, or even stevia." So I have lots of thoughts on these. All of those are technically added sugar. Okay. If you want to sweeten something, I would prefer that you use um, a piece of fruit, like plain yogurt, add fruit. Or if you want to sweeten your your steel cut oats in the morning and you want to add fruit into it to sweeten that, that would be the ultimate goal. Now, but it's all a spectrum. Nutrition is really about compared to what. So if we're talking about like that white granulated sugar, is honey better than the white granulated sugar? Slightly, slightly. And the reason is that honey contains some micronutrients, although in very, very trace amounts, but it actually contains some polyphenols and antioxidants that actually have slight immune boosting properties. So if you convert from honey to, if you're a white, a table sugar kind of sweetener, and you convert to honey, that's a good nudge in the right direction. Okay. But I would love for you to get to the place where you're using less and less honey to sweeten, because that is a sign that you're actually conditioning your taste buds to like less and less sweet stuff. Okay. So, keep nudging yourself away from that super sweet stuff, because then you will get to the place where actually the piece of fruit is is sugar enough. That is enough flavor. That's enough sweetening for yourself. The one I hopefully you guys can see I'm not a black or white person. There's nothing that's off limits, but I will say I put my foot down on artificial sweeteners. I put my foot down on the aspartame, the stevias, all of those things. I actually really discourage you from eating those. If even though they're 0 calories, I would prefer you not to use them. I'd prefer you to use table sugar over stevia. And the reason is this: artificial sweeteners are super sweet. So they actually, when you take them in, even though they're 0 calories, they condition your taste buds to like and crave super sweet. They're 10 times sweeter than table sugar. Okay. So what happens is when you're eating stevia or you're drinking your diet soda or you're drinking your juice with, 0 sugar items, what you're doing is you're telling your brain and your taste buds, like, I love this super sweet stuff. And you end up craving it more. The other problem is that you send a signal to your brain the minute that sweet thing hits your tongue. You send the signal to your brain that it's about to get a ton of calories. And so it actually increases the insulin in your bloodstream. And then the body doesn't get the calories because it was an artificial sweetener, and you crash. And then you end up eating more because the body says, "Oh my god, yeah, I was supposed to get more calories than I expected and it didn't get it." So artificial sweeteners totally screw up the wiring in your brain. They're too sweet, and they don't deliver the caloric load that your brain was expecting. So, long answer. I'm happy to expand upon that more. Hopefully that was helpful.
Thank you. Love that. Curious now about sodium. Isn't avoiding it most important for liver disease? Or thoughts on sodium
Hmm.
consumption?
Hmm. This gets to the idea that the recommendations for priorities in your nutritional strategies will differ by your stage of liver disease. Avoidance of sodium is more important when the liver is in its final stages of cirrhosis, and the individual is having difficulty managing fluid. So if they're experiencing complications like ascites or edema, then avoiding sodium does become an important adjunctive strategy to helping to manage the fluid. In the earlier stages of liver disease, when the liver is functioning perfectly well, doesn't have cirrhosis. Avoiding sodium actually is about as important as avoiding sodium for your general health, which is, to avoid hypertension, but it's not necessarily the greatest priority. So now, of course, if you do have high blood pressure and that is a big problem for you, avoiding sodium will be an incredibly important strategy to managing your overall health. And your cardiologist and your primary care doctor will definitely want you to minimize sodium. But in my opinion, honestly, avoiding sugar and ultra processed foods is much higher on the list. Increasing fiber is much higher on the list. But if you adhere to 80 and 30, you will naturally have a lower sodium diet.
That's great. Thank you. Viewers, we're so happy. Keep sending your questions in. I'll kind of moderate and see what's coming in on the chat session. I want to bring in Karen Hoyt and Susan Harava for the next point of our conversation for the viewers. Some of your questions likely will be answered in this next set. So hang tight because this is a really great second part of our conversation.
Hi, Karen. Hi,
Thank
Susan.
you.
Thanks for joining us.
Hi. Well, thank you. I wanted to give my thanks to GLI for the way that they brought the patient voice forward and lifted the patient voice and giving us the information that we need and introducing us to these kind of webinars where we can learn more about how to take care of our bodies. My introduction, I was diagnosed with an emergency room diagnosis when I had real terrible ascites. I swelled up, and it was end-stage liver disease with variceal bleeding in my early 50s. And I didn't know what to do. And so I got on the internet like everybody else and learned a lot about how to get my body calmed down and to be treated for hepatitis C. I'd gotten the hepatitis C virus probably when I worked in a medical environment in my early 20s. And I started a website because I just was lonely and looking for other people. And then I wrote a book called The Liver Loving Diet, and I began to use nutrition and diet as a way to bring my body back. I survived liver cancer. Eventually, I was cured of Hep C. I survived liver cancer and received a life-giving transplant 10 years ago. And thanks to doctors like Dr. Lai, I watch her on YouTube and I've heard her speak in person. She's always my favorite at the liver meeting. And it's she's kind of like our personal doctor. I've never seen anyone take more interest in nutrition and the patient taking control of their lives. And I'm just really thankful to be a part of this. Susan?
Oh, great. Thank you. I also want to thank GLI for this opportunity to share my story and to help so many people that struggle with the question, what am I supposed to eat when I have liver disease? And yes, Dr. Lai has also been very instrumental in my liver journey. I have a story that most of you can relate to. I bounced around with weight my whole life. I had polycystic ovarian syndrome, which was diagnosed when I was 16. And so I was no stranger to metabolic disease. And in my late adult years, I started getting blood work showing high liver enzymes, which were just ignored by my doctor. A switch to another state brought me to another physician who said, oh, these liver enzymes are high. I think you need to lose some weight. Well, everyone my whole life said that's the cure for everything. So the numbers kept showing that there was something going on. And she did an ultrasound and said, okay, well, you have fat on your liver. There's that word again, fat, and lose some weight. So during this time, I had terrible indigestion and found myself at a gastroenterologist who said, well, forget your indigestion. Look at this long history that points to liver disease. I'm like, but I don't understand. I don't drink. He said, no, we're gonna test a lot of things. And I ended up with a very high FIB4 score and a fiber scan showing F4. Biopsy showed that I had cirrhosis, and it was much to his surprise. And I got a call from him personally saying, I'm so sorry. And I thought, what does that mean, you're sorry? Started looking at Dr. Google and thought, okay, I don't have much time to live, but I need to figure this out. So the first thing I did after Dr. Google was figure out, well, where exactly is my liver and what does it do? And as Dr. Lai mentioned, this is such an incredible organ that we have in our bodies. Over 500 functions, and everything I put in my mouth, it affects my liver. So I learned to really respect and love my liver. I ended up seeing a hepatologist in the clinic with the gastro who was quite abrupt and said, you know, you've got a MELD score of 8, and basically there's nothing we can do but wait till you need a transplant, and you'll be seen every 6 months. Oh, and go on a Mediterranean diet. And I said, what exactly does that mean? I mean, is that pasta? Is that falafel? What is it? And she said, just go look it up. So I went out to the parking lot in tears. And I was angry and I was mad and I was praying. And I'm like, I can't believe this is my fate. And suddenly the strength came from within. And I said, no, I'm not taking this laying down. So I started learning more and more about my liver and why I became with this diagnosis, why I got cirrhosis. I did not eat meat, just fish and salmon, but I loved sugar. I mean, this time of year, it would be nothing to eat a bag of jelly beans. And so the first thing I knew is that sugar was not good for my liver. And I gave myself a week that I am going to start reading labels. And if it has more than 3 or 4 grams of added sugar, I'm not eating it. So in a week's time, I suddenly noticed that apples tasted like candy and fruit was just incredibly good. And so I kept going. And then I started learning more. And I finally realized if I cannot read what an ingredient is, let alone understand on a package, my liver is not going to get fed with that. I watched everything I ate. I still do. I read labels like crazy. I switched to olive oil for cooking. I roast a lot of things. I do a lot of cooking, but I also learned what to ask for in restaurants and what happens when you're under pressure. You go to the family picnic and it's all the food you can't eat. And this was a whole new world for me, but it turned out to be a beautiful world. I also found a way that I love to exercise, and I know that movement helped. And I also found out that this is not just a diet, it's a lifestyle change. It's all about not only what you put in your mouth, it's moving your body, it's getting enough sleep, it's removing stress from your life, getting rid of toxic relationships, finding support, taking care of your mental health. All of this affects your liver. So I had a visit about 3 years ago with a hepatologist who ordered an MRE. And this was a new hepatologist that barely looked up from his charts to look at me. And he's like, yeah, well, let's do some blood work and we'll figure out your MELD score and let's do this MRE. A few days later, I received a call from him personally. He said, let me read this on your MRI. And my heart's pounding. What is this? He said, you have no hepatic steatosis in your liver, none. And he's like, how did you do this? There's nothing there. And it just made me feel so good.
Congratulations. Yeah,
Thanks.
that's an amazing ability that you had to use diet, nutrition, and exercise to turn all of that around.
Yeah, it really works. And I decided to become not only an advocate, but a certified health coach, and to use my voice to give people hope that everyone, no matter what stage you are in your liver disease, you've got some control. And I love how I eat now. It's just, I would not go back, even though my liver's healthy. I don't miss any of those foods that I used to eat. I can honestly say that.
I think
Everything
many
tastes
of us,
so much better.
yes, I think many of us, and I think many of the, excuse me, I want to be sure and get all of our questions in. And
Oh, yeah.
but I think many of us can identify with that. And one of our questions actually had to do with some of the emotional content and the grieving process that we go through as patients. Sometimes patients come in and they may hear Susan's story and my story, I was able to
Mhm.
reverse to come with medication. I worked with my doctor, but partnering nutrition and medication together. What do you think when you hear of people, doctor, who talk about reversing liver disease, addressing the cause of inflammation with your medical provider and at the same time using nutrition? Have you seen that partner well?
Absolutely. I think they go hand in hand. Now, it's very important to recognize where the limits of nutrition are. So, for example, Karen, you had hepatitis C. The idea of using nutrition alone as a strategy to cure hepatitis C, well, that doesn't square with what we know of science, right? So it is very important to work with your hepatologist to make sure you're doing what you can from Western medicine, from conventional medicine, to make sure you're optimizing the treatment and the therapeutic strategies there. But nutrition is absolutely critical to reducing all of the ancillary, the inflammation that is happening. All of the, nutrition is so important in your fatigue, how you feel. It plays such a big role in depression and anxiety, and that all plays in, and also stress and management of stress and optimizing your immune system. All of that can enhance the Western strategies, the Western therapeutics that we have to help support and maximize treatment of chronic liver disease. So they're really synergistic, in my opinion. But I think it is, thanks for bringing that up, Karen. It's very important for us to recognize that nutrition can't do everything to cure liver disease, but it work with your hepatologist to figure out where and how nutrition can play a huge role in supporting your liver.
Thank you. And there was an additional question that came along with that. Many people like myself are in rural areas. And so
Mm.
our doctor tells us, like you, Susan, go on a Mediterranean diet. Or for me, it was
Mhm.
reduce sodium and cut out,
Mhm.
vitamins and stop the nutritional supplements. But I wonder at what point, if you're when you're dealing with a compensated versus decompensation, you're at a big hospital, Dr. Lyon. I know many doctors rely on your advice, but what do you do if you don't have a doctor that's giving you nutritional advice and you know that you're looking at that compensated, decompensated? Is that something that a patient anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world could take to their doctor and ask that in the form of a question?
Just a clarification in terms of where they are in their liver disease, or what nutritional strategies would best match their liver
Right. Is
disease.
there a scale? I noticed in your slides, and
Mhm.
we can go back and watch this repeatedly once it's released on YouTube. But when you get to that place of cirrhosis and you are
Mhm.
decompensated,
Yep.
our nutritional needs will change at that point?
Yep. So I will say that the 80-30-10 strategy is really good for anyone at any stage. Getting exercise is very important. Getting fiber, optimizing the diversity of plants enhances the microbiome, which is really important at any stage of the liver disease. The only difference is that when individuals have decompensated cirrhosis, that's really cirrhosis that with the added complications like the encephalopathy, Karen, that you mentioned, with ascites, with the variceal bleeding, those kinds of complications, that's when you know that the liver has gone into failure. And that's when the strategies of getting sufficient calories as well as sufficient protein is actually becomes slightly more important than reducing excess caloric intake, largely because patients don't feel well. And so their challenge is actually they just don't feel like eating at all, or their belly is too full of ascites that they can't put in enough fluid. So they end up losing muscle mass. So when a patient is at the very end stages of liver disease, the priority should switch to making sure that the body is that the nutritional strategy is kind of helping keep up with the body's needs, as opposed to when the liver is compensated or before the liver even has advanced scarring. At that point, the liver is functioning well. So then it really is just about how can we use nutrition to protect the liver. And this should be that is something that a primary care doctor or a gastroenterologist or a hepatologist anywhere should be able to answer with things like what Susan had mentioned, the FIB4, a FibroScan. There are definitely ways to stage the scarring of the liver that are accessible anywhere.
Thank you so much. Yes, that's really valuable to know because yes, even our our PAs, in our local doctor's office can have that advice. Another question we had is adhering to dietary recommendations can be a challenge based on cultural traditions and maybe financial limitations and lifestyle demands such as aging and affordability. When people have that kind of extreme stuff, do you ever run into patients? You're from a large city. Do you ever have patients who run into those? And how do you, I think of you as an encourager, and that means we borrow from your courage because you seem to really have a lot of hope for us, liver disease patients. How do you encourage your patients?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is to find that internal motivation is why are you trying to eat a healthier or follow a healthier lifestyle. You've got to have the why. So, I really try to get at that with my patients. And I actually just saw a patient yesterday, and his why was not yesterday, but last week, his why was his granddaughter. His new granddaughter that was born. I said, well, your why, you want to see your granddaughter go to kindergarten and, ultimately graduate from elementary school to middle school and, hopefully high school. And so, that's your motivation for adhering to healthier lifestyle. And we're in it for the long haul. So that doesn't mean tomorrow you're going to switch from your diet that's full of, processed meats and ultra processed foods to tomorrow eating salads all day. It means that, over the next couple of years, as you're watching your granddaughter grow, eventually when she goes to kindergarten, let's look back and see that your diet, and your lifestyle has changed significantly. So the first thing is finding the why. The second is I want to give you all a tool that has actually come into all of our lives over the last 2 years, and that is your favorite large language model, such as ChatGPT. I use ChatGPT all the time. That has completely changed the way that I answer this question about affordability, any cultural barriers. These days, when I'm in clinic, I ask my patients, give me your 5 favorite fruits and your 5 favorite, vegetables, and give me 2 grains. And I will put it into ChatGPT, and I say, I have a guy sitting in front of me. He's 60. I just diagnosed him with fatty liver disease, and give me a meal plan for the next 3 days that incorporates these things. And, I'm sitting there typing as they're listing off their fruits and vegetables, and they'll just give me these recipes, and they'll give me a shopping list. And that is, and then I can even add, if financial constraints are an issue, I can even add, and, I would really prefer that, the meals are less than $10 a meal, or, less than $15 a day or something like that. I will say that, even if you don't have financial constraints, it's still very easy to eat affordably. Think about dried beans and grains. I use bags of beans and grains all the time in my diet. And those are very affordable. Think about frozen. My freezer is full of frozen berries, full of frozen vegetables. I am lucky to live in California, so I can access a lot of fresh, but I still use a lot of frozen because I can't get to the market all the time. And so frozen spinach is a go-to. Frozen berries are a go-to to stick into my yogurt. So really, and those are just as healthful as the fresh. So think about, those dried goods, the frozen, and even canned are great options. There are lots of low sodium options as well. But don't forget to go to your favorite large language models, such as ChatGPT, for ideas.
That's
I want
great.
to add to that too, that I noticed that when I'm at the grocery store and I'm looking at what other people are buying, it's a lot more expensive to eat unhealthy. The sodas and the processed food and the cookies versus what I do is shop around the perimeter, and it's a lot. I have a lot less in my cart, and everything I put in there, I use. I also take advantage of my freezer and buying seasonally, farmers markets and storing things. All those are great ways, no matter what your budget is, to eat healthy.
Super great ideas.
So those are all great ideas. We've talked about everything. We've talked about a lot. And Dr. Lai, I think we could just spend all evening with you. I hope we get an opportunity to do this again, because I know you are a source of wealth. of information for us as patients. And I want to say thank you again to Global Liver. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can squeeze one more question in. When the dietary challenges and the emotions and the busy lifestyle and the lack of support come into play, what strategies, and we talked about the motivation, so we've kind of answered that, but like overcoming obstacles, I remember getting really depressed. And Susan, you mentioned that. My first Thanksgiving, my sibling group said, let's all eat together. And then I couldn't eat anything that was anything because they had salted and they'd done everything. And I just laid on the couch and cried. I just thought, oh, I'm not gonna, and that was like 15 years ago now. But I had to grieve. And Dr. Lai, do you see your patients go through stages of grieving and just say, I know I've got to let go of this. Susan makes it sound so easy. Susan, if you'd come, if you know, everyone listening would probably say, if I could go shop with Susan, then, and if Susan would come home with me, I could do this. And thankfully you're a coach and you offer this. But what about when the patient's home alone and maybe I was a teacher and I lost my insurance, I lost my COBRA when I was hospitalized. I literally had to move in with my kids. All my money was spent on medical bills. I thought I was going into my golden years of retirement. Everything really changed, and I ended up on food stamps. And I'm not ashamed to admit that, but I mean, I was like literally begging for free protein drinks at the DHS department here in Oklahoma. Where there's a will, there's a way. But we do understand as patients that there is a grieving. So I guess the question to that would be, whenever patients are just really up against the wall and the emotions are high, do you see them kind of work through those stages of grief, you know, denial, and then they come in and they've eaten too much salt or sugar, and you're like, your labs are telling me the truth about your life, but
thank you for sharing that story. It's such an important question. And I think this really goes to the overall approach of nutrition. It's not black or white. You're not healthy and you're not unhealthy, healthy, you're either healthy or you're unhealthy. It's all about slowly shifting and nudging towards a general philosophy and a general approach to the way that you eat. I mean, if you even saw the way that I ate this weekend, and I had plenty of ultra processed foods this weekend, but the point is not to beat yourself up over it. The point is to say, okay, I definitely ate, my cheddar cheese puffs that I love so much this weekend, but today's a new day and I'm going to celebrate the victory in that, I grabbed the apple instead of the cheddar cheese puffs for my afternoon snack, and I'm going to celebrate that. So I don't want you to treat food and nutrition and sort of the lifestyle as a way to beat yourself up over it. Tomorrow, there's always a new opportunity, and the idea is to look at your overall over the last week, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. Am I doing better than I was 6 months ago? Well, if you're even thinking about that, if you're even looking at your week, I can guarantee you that you are. So celebrate the process in sort of broad strokes and not like the individual meal and the individual things that you ate.
Thank you.
I'd like to speak to real quick just on the emotional part. When I was diagnosed, I mean, I'm single, I live by myself. And I think all of us go through that process, but that's where that intrinsic, why do you want to be healthy? No matter how alone you are, how you're just overwhelmed with work and trying to cook for yourself and everything else, it's that why, because the why gives you hope. And as long as you have that, and if you don't have that, that's where your support system comes in. And everyone, whether you're in a support group, you have friends, you see a counselor to get you through those tough times.
Thank you. That's so important. And at GLI, we have come together as patients. Our first meeting together was over 10 years ago, and there was, I think, 13 patients, and we've grown now. And here's Sarah to welcome us back and wrap it up for us. Thank you for giving us the big picture and the details, Dr. Lai, and thank you so much, Susan, for lending your perspective.
Thank you, Karen.
Well, thank you, everyone. And Karen, I didn't mean to interrupt. I wanted to pop on. I think that we can all feel the passion from the three of you, but the excitement and the ability. I think Dr. Lai, a couple weeks ago, we shared this webinar could easily be a 4-day retreat. People have so many questions. I know we want to be mindful of all of your time and certainly our viewers who are with us today. But, please know these questions are so important and these conversations are so important. And Karen, you had mentioned too, I rewatched the YouTube videos. Susan, you talking about the resources, and it's really helpful for us to refamiliarize ourselves, continue to be retaught and engaged with us because things change and things in life change too. So I am just so appreciative of all of you being here and adding to this conversation. So thank you for your dedication to improving the lives of people with liver disease, improving the lives of people with liver cancer, and also just general health. This is really important information for liver health. As you'll see, featured on the screen. First of all, many thanks to our sponsors to make today possible, but also we have really important resources that we have linked. Also making sure that we know many of you submitted your questions. We have gathered those questions. We will make sure after this is done, we include this on our resource page. This will be on our YouTube page as well, and we'll continue answering those questions within the comment section. So come on back, and we are here to continue to have conversations and help you. I also wanted to mention specifically, we have a NutriStyle link that's on this page right now. We want to make sure that patients have access using the link provided. You can find liver-friendly nutrition plans. NutriStyle is a nutrition-based web app that provides personalized meal plans and grocery guidance based on users' health goals, dietary needs, and preferences. Backed by clinical nutritionists, it offers condition-specific menus, such as those promoting liver health, through partnerships with healthcare organizations like GLI. NutriStyle will also help support dietitians, nutrition programs, and tools that translate evidence-based guidelines into actionable food choices, making healthy eating more accessible and tailored to individual needs. Dr. Lai, also wanted to mention, I just love, and every time I hear you speak, learn something new when you mentioned the ChatGPT. It's right at our fingertips. Like, it couldn't be easier. We could already Google these things, but really using AI programs to help generate specific support. It helps us with budget style. It helps us with culturally based food preferences, all of those things. So thank you. So everyone, please do check out those resources. You also can always find more information about GLI and our work at globalliver.org, and specific to liver cancer at livercentral.org, our hub for liver cancer resources and research. Thank you again to all of you, Susan, Karen, Dr. Lai. I hope we can do this again soon. It's just an absolute pleasure, and we appreciate your generosity and time today.
It was my
Thank you,
pleasure.
Karen.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.